Today we're wrestling with a genuinely fascinating paradox in the gaming world, something that I think has sent some real shockwaves through the industry.
It really has. It's forced a lot of big developers to, take a hard look at their budgets and question that whole blockbuster model.
Exactly. Because it's the story of a pretty niche game that just executed its strategy so flawlessly that it transformed itself overnight from this beloved super complex city builder into a top-tier commercial hit.
And that game is Anno 117, Pax Romana.
Right. For what, 25 years, the Anno franchise has been this thing for a very specific type of PC player. People who just love deep logistics, complex supply chains.
The optimization loops.
Yes. And yet when Ubisoft Mains launched Anno 117 late last year, in 2025, it didn't just do well. It launched with a kind of commercial velocity that just shattered every single record the franchise ever had.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack the mechanics behind that, that explosive success. We've got sources that detail how a team that focused on polish, on accessibility, and on just focus quality.
Yeah.
How they managed to get the fastest selling launch in the series history and the highest critical rating. And the key thing here, the context, is that this happened while other games are consuming, as our sources put it, hundreds of millions of USD.
Right. Anno 117 proved you don't need that massive upfront spend if your execution is, well, surgical. That's the whole story, isn't it?
Yeah.
How did this very specialized game not just survive the holiday season?
It didn't just survive.
It outmaneuvered the biggest fish in the pond. I mean, I still have trouble believing the headline that came out of it.
Oh, yeah. And the market data confirms it wasn't just a fluke. This was a strategic victory. Anno 117 didn't just sell well, and I'm quoting here, outperformed major Q4 competitors in revenue velocity.
Which is already a huge claim.
It is. But that's not even the real kicker. For anyone who understands the pecking order in the gaming market, this is the part that's just unbelievable. During its first week on Steam, it outsold the new Call of Duty.
Black Ops 7.
Black Ops 7.
Yeah, let that just sink in for a minute. A historically complex, some would say intimidating, city-building game. A genre for spreadsheets and supply chains. It beat the launch week revenue of the biggest annual shooter franchise on the biggest PC platform. I mean, it's not just a success story. That is a fundamental challenge to the whole AAA mindset.
It absolutely is. It's a strategic repositioning. It proves that focused, high-quality execution can actually beat sheer budgetary scale.
Okay, so let's dig into the numbers because they really tell the story here. This wasn't just growth. This was like an explosion in market adoption for a series that's been around for decades.
Right, an exponential acceleration. So we know it's officially the fastest selling title in the series history. But to really get how big a deal that is, you have to remember where Anno was just a few years ago.
With Anno 1800, which was, by all accounts, a massive success for the franchise at the time.
A gargantuan success. And the data shows that 1800 sold 4 times more at launch than its predecessor, Anno 2205. So that was already a huge leap forward.
Okay, so 1800 was already the outlier.
Exactly. So for Anno 117 to come along and smash that record, it tells you this wasn't just about the loyal fans coming back. They captured a totally new, massive demographic.
And we can see just how massive from the Steam data, right? I mean, even with the console launch, Steam is still the home for these kinds of deep simulation games.
It's the heartland. And the numbers there are crucial. In its first week, the game was hitting, number 2 or number 3 on the global bestseller chart on Steam. That's by revenue.
So it's sitting right there next to the biggest games in the world.
Right next to them. But the metric that really shows the concentrated hype is the concurrent player count, the CCU.
Let's just quickly define that. That's the number of people playing the game at the exact same moment. It's a huge indicator of launch day buzz.
Correct. And Anno 117 hit a peak of over 50,000 concurrent users on Steam alone.
50,000. Okay, so for context, what did Anno 1800 do at launch? Because again, that was a huge hit.
It was. And 1800's launch day peak was 25,214.
It's rub. They doubled it.
Pretty much doubled
They
it.
literally doubled the concentrated launch demand. For a series known for its complexity, that's just staggering. How was it all down to the Roman theme, or was there something else going on?
The theme was huge. We'll get to that. But there's a structural reason you can't ignore, and that's platform strategy.
Oh, okay.
You have to remember, Anno 1800 had that period of exclusivity on the Epic Games Store. It came to Steam much, much later.
Right, so the audience was split. The launch hype wasn't all in one place.
Exactly. It fractured the audience. Anno 117 launched everywhere, globally, on Steam from day one. They capitalized on that entire massive strategy game audience all at once. That unified strategy, plus the appeal of Rome, turned interest into just an immediate, explosive wave of sales.
It makes total sense. They just aggregated all that demand instead of spreading it out.
Okay, so where are all these players coming from? This leads us to the geographic data, which suggests they cracked markets that historically have found Anno a bit much.
And this data really validates their entire expansion strategy. So the franchise has always been a monster in its core markets, what they call the DACH region, Germany, Austria, Switzerland.
The traditional home of complex PC strategy games.
Right. And predictably, Anno 117 hit #1 there. That was the guaranteed money. The home base was secured.
But the real story, the one that matters for growth, is breaking out of that base.
Exactly. And that's where the global expansion markets come in. The game hit the top 10 in major Western territories. It was #5 in the UK, #8 in the US.
Okay, that's the hard data right there. That's the proof that they are attracting, as the source says, non-traditional Anno consumers. They broke out of Central Europe.
They did, and successfully. But why? Why did the US and UK markets suddenly decide to jump into a complex logistics game? Was the Roman theme really that powerful?
It was a massive piece of the puzzle, yeah. But it was also the accessibility of the game itself, that Anno Lite model we'll talk about, and crucially, the fact that it was on consoles from day one.
Right. The barriers to entry were just lower. You didn't need a high-end PC, and the theme felt more familiar than, say, the Industrial Revolution.
Precisely. They made a complex game look and feel approachable enough for those bigger markets to finally take the plunge.
And once they took the plunge, did they stick around? This gets us to engagement, to product stickiness. Because it's one thing to sell a game, it's another to keep people playing.
And for a live service model, that's everything. The retention data we have is incredibly strong. During its launch week, the game registered a remarkable average daily playing time of 3.7 hours.
Wait, almost 4 hours a day on average? For a city builder?
For a city builder,
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
Wow.
And you have to remember, this isn't some quick 10-minute multiplayer match. This is a game where you are methodically planning layouts, optimizing trade routes, staring at production chains.
That's a time commitment.
The huge one. And that level of daily play tells you the core loop they built is just incredibly compelling. It's addictive.
From a business perspective, that playtime number is almost more important than the sales number, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's the golden metric. It does two critical things. First, it significantly de-risks potential churn. If you've already sunk, say, 20 hours into your Roman city in the first week, you're not likely to just drop it.
You're invested.
You're invested. And second, it creates the perfect foundation for future monetization. These are the players who are going to buy the season pass, the cosmetic packs. The core quality of the game is what's driving not just the initial sale, but all the future revenue as well.
So the numbers are just undeniable. Record sales, double the players, fantastic retention. Let's pivot now to how they did it, the strategic pillars. Our sources point to two main engines here, the theme and the platforms. Let's start with Rome. Why 117 AD?
The choice of the Pax Romana was, I think you could argue, the single most important decision they made for audience acquisition. The Roman Empire just has this near-universal recognition and appeal.
You don't need a history degree to know what a Roman aqueduct looks like.
Exactly. It's an iconic, highly marketable backdrop for city planning and trade. It immediately feels familiar.
So it provides that visual appeal for the mass market, but it still has the logistical depth that the veterans want.
It does, and the sources confirm this. The theme was the critical factor that helped new players get over their fear of the franchise's notorious complexity. It gave them a familiar entry point. You're governing two provinces, Laudium in the heartland and Albion in ancient Britain.
Which is a narrative that just makes sense. It's digestible. It's not as abstract as managing, 5 different continents with different needs all at once.
Right. It cloaked that classic, complex Anno loop in this rich, universally understood package. It was a brilliant move.
So if the Roman theme was the magnet, the second pillar console connectivity was the delivery system, the way to get into millions more hands.
That's a great way to put it. The decision to launch on PS5 and Xbox Series X and S at the same time as PCA first for the series was a huge gamble. and it paid off massively.
Strategy games have always been a PC-first genre, though.
They have, but the market is shifting. If you look at the growth forecasts, the compound annual growth rate, or CAGR console revenue, is projected to grow at around 7% through 2027. PC is just over 2.5%.
So the real growth, the acceleration, it's all happening on console right now. If you want to expand, you have to be there.
You simply can't afford to ignore it. And it's not just a bigger market, it's a more valuable one in some ways. The average revenue per paying user, the RPPU, is higher on console.
Well, much higher.
The data says it's about $81 on console versus $55 on PC.
Wow, that's a huge gap. Over $25 more per player. Why is that?
It's a mix of things. Console ecosystems are more closed. There's more platform lock-in. But also, console players just have a higher tendency to buy the deluxe editions, the season passes, all the add-on content.
So that simultaneous launch was designed to tap into that higher value market right from day one.
It was essential for hitting that high launch week revenue velocity.
But this must have created a huge technical headache. I mean, Anno is a game of tiny icons, complex menus, and precision mouse clicks. How on earth do you translate that to a controller?
It was, according to the sources, the single biggest development challenge they faced. They couldn't just map mouse clicks to a joystick. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
They had to basically redesign the entire user interface from the ground up for controllers. Things like radial menus, smart cursor snapping, contextual actions. They had to maintain the game's complexity, but radically simplify the interaction with that complexity.
A non-negotiable investment then.
Absolutely. There was no way to unlock the console revenue without it, and it's a commitment that goes beyond launch, too. They learned their lesson from Anno 1800's console port, which came late and felt a bit like an afterthought.
Right.
With Anno 117, they've committed to total cross-platform parity. All the updates, and crucially all the big expansions, will hit PC and console at the same time with the same quality. They're nurturing that new audience because they know that's where the long-term growth is.
Okay, so this is where the story gets really interesting and really complicated. The game is a commercial juggernaut.
Yeah.
Fastest selling ever. But the reception is split.
Yep.
A huge critical success on one side and a lot of user friction on the other. Let's start with the critics.
The professional reviews were glowing. It has a Metacritic score of 85, which makes it the highest-rated Anno game in history.
The highest ever. Wow. What did they like so much?
The polish, mostly. Critics called it impeccably polished, approachable, and a beautiful blend of the ancient theme with modern design. They recognized that the game was focused, it ran perfectly, and that core loop was incredibly satisfying. They called it a highly rewarding time sink.
Which explains the 3.7 hours of daily playtime.
It totally does. The critics saw the quality and rewarded it. It validates that whole strategy of focusing on quality over just, sheer quantity of content at launch.
But then you look at the user scores.
And you see the other side of the coin. The Metacritic user score is down around a 6.6, mixed or average.
That's a nearly 20-point gap between the critics and the players. That's huge. What happened there?
That gap is the direct result of the big strategic risk they took, what we're calling the Anno-lite base game model.
Okay, so Anno-lite drove the sales, but it's also the source of the backlash from the hardcore fans. Explain what that means in practice.
So the base game was intentionally designed to be less daunting. The goal was mass market appeal, high sales, especially on console. And the biggest change they made was moving away from the often overwhelming multi-continental structure of Anno 1800.
Right. In 1800, you were juggling like 4 or 5 different maps at once. The Old World, the New World, the Arctic, all with their own populations and supply chains that had to feed into each other. It was a lot.
It was a massive cognitive load. So Anno 117 simplified that by focusing on just 2 provinces, Latium and Albion. It was a strategic shift from what you'd call vertical depth to horizontal complexity.
Okay, we need to define those terms because that seems key to the whole veteran complaint. What's the difference?
Vertical depth is the complexity within one map.
Right.
So how many steps does it take to make one product? How many different needs do your high-level citizens have? Think coffee and gramophones in 1800. That game was a monster of vertical depth. Anno 117 focused more on horizontal complexity, managing 2 distinct regions with different resources that trade with each other. The production chains within each region were intentionally simpler, shorter. It made the moment-to-moment gameplay easier to manage, especially for newcomers.
So they consciously sacrificed some of that deep, intricate complexity that veterans love in order to onboard millions of new players. And that trade-off is where the friction comes from.
Yeah.
What were the specific complaints?
The word that kept coming up in user reviews was dumbed down. Veterans felt the production chains were too short, the citizen needs weren't demanding enough. The challenge wasn't in mastering intricate logistics, but just in managing two separate, simpler economies.
And there were specific features from 1800 that were gone, right, that really annoyed people.
Yes, and this is where you see that loss of vertical depth most clearly. They basically removed the endgame. In 1800, you had the zoo, the museum, and the expeditions. These were systems that had you hunting for hundreds of rare items for powerful buffs.
I remember spending dozens of hours just trying to find one specific legendary animal for my zoo.
Right, and that was the long-term hook for so many players. It was a collectible game inside a city builder. The item system that replaced it in Anno 117 was described by players as hollow. It just didn't have that same long-tail appeal.
So the veterans felt that the end game, the thing that keeps you playing for hundreds of hours, had been sacrificed for the sake of the console launch.
That's the feeling, yeah. They saw it as a predictable structural consequence of needing to make the game work smoothly on a controller.
Which brings us to the big question. How do they fix this? Because you can't have the highest rated Anno ever with a user score this low. You need to win back those high engagement players.
And their entire plan hinges on the live service model. The strategy wasn't to eliminate complexity, but to defer it. The Egypt expansion is the key. That's supposed to add a third province, and with it, all the new complex production chains the high-tier citizen needs. Basically, all the vertical depth that veterans feel is missing from the base game.
So the promise is basically, we gave you a polished, accessible foundation to bring everyone in. Now, with the money from that success, we're going to build the complex skyscraper on top of it that you veterans are waiting for.
That's the strategy in a nutshell. Maximize sales with accessibility, then monetize the engaged veterans over the long term with the complex content they crave. It's a risk, but the high quality of the launch gives them the goodwill to ask players to trust the roadmap.
Okay, so while all this was happening, record sales, critical acclaim, user backlash, there was another story bubbling up. Something completely outside of the gameplay that started to hurt the game's perception.
The AI asset controversy, yeah. And it's a really sharp reminder for the whole industry that how you make your game is becoming just as important as the game itself.
So what happened exactly?
The issue was that an AI-generated image, which was supposed to be a placeholder, accidentally slipped through and made it into the final game on some of the loading screens.
And people noticed it was AI-generated how?
It had all the classic tells, the characteristic AI oopsies,
Yeah.
Weirdly deformed hands, a head missing in the background, things that a human artist would never let through. In a game praised for being so polished, it was incredibly jarring.
Fascinating. So a single bad asset, something not even related to the core gameplay, was enough to drag down public perception.
Immediately. The community response was, according to our sources, a zero-tolerance stance. If you look at the low user reviews, a lot of them explicitly mention the AI art. They're not complaining about production chains. They're scoring the game low because of the ethical implications of how that one asset was made.
So the player base is almost acting like an ethical watchdog now?
They absolutely are. It shows that ethical production management is now a non-negotiable component of IP management. It's a quantifiable risk. And the failure here wasn't necessarily using AI tools. Most big studios use them for brainstorming and things like that. The failure was a lack of human oversight. The QA process missed it.
But did it actually hurt them? I mean, the game still outsold Black Ops 7. From a purely business perspective, did this controversy even matter?
In the long run, it matters immensely. It's all about trust. The Anno franchise relies on a long-term relationship with its community. Damaging that trust, even over something small, is risky when you're asking that same community to stick around and buy your expansions.
Especially when they're already a bit unhappy about the Annolite situation.
Exactly. It's a solvable problem, but it requires them to be transparent about it.
So the big takeaway for the industry is what? Don't use AI.
No, the takeaway is strict, human-supervised asset quality assurance. You can use the tools to be more efficient, but the final product that the customer sees has to be checked by a human. The cost to your reputation if you slip up is just far too high. The community is using their user scores to enforce that standard.
So when you put it all together, this deep dive really feels like it's laid out a new blueprint for success in gaming. The story of Anno 117 is it's a triumph of smart, focused strategy over just throwing money at a project.
It really is. They proved that if you prioritize a highly polished, accessible launch, pick a theme with universal appeal like Rome, and expand strategically to consoles, you can beat the blockbusters. You can drive higher sales velocity than games with budgets in the hundreds of millions.
It's just a stunning testament to high-quality execution. The team at Ubisoft Mainz just nailed the core loop, the presentation. I mean, the 3.7-hour average playtime says it all. The quality is there.
They launched a high-quality, approachable product that critics loved, and in doing so, they've repositioned the entire franchise as a major asset for Ubisoft.
But, as we've said, that success is conditional. It's provisional. The veteran players are waiting, the complaints about depth are real, and that AI issue damaged some trust.
That's right. The whole thing now rests on two factors. First, they absolutely have to deliver on that year one content. The Egypt expansion has to land on time, be high quality, and it has to have that vertical complexity the veterans are demanding. They made a trade-off at launch, now they have to honor their end of the bargain.
And
Second, they have to maintain strict ethical production standards to rebuild that trust. The whole industry is watching how they handle the use of AI tools versus human artists in their live service.
it really feels like we're in a moment where players are just overwhelmed. There's so much stuff out there. But they'd rather have one really high-quality thing they can trust than 10 mediocre ones.
That's the perfect way to sum it up. The data shows players are overwhelmed by an ever-increasing amount of content, yet spending more time on fewer titles. And in that environment, launching a focused, accessible Anno-like product, a perfect foundation, with a clear roadmap for adding depth later, that is a commercially superior strategy to the old model of just cramming everything in at launch.
So if the lesson here is that a polished foundation beats massive upfront complexity, what's the final provocative thought we leave everyone with? What does this mean for the future of AAA games?
I think the challenge to the industry is this. When a focused strategy game made for a fraction of the budget can outsell a flagship blockbuster on Steam by deferring its complexity, what does that say about the entire model of massive, complex, and often buggy day-one releases? Is the era of trying to launch an intimidating skyscraper of content right out of the gate actually over? Is it being replaced by this more successful strategy of launching a perfect foundation and then building the depth incrementally, ensuring quality every step of the way?
And Anno 17's numbers would suggest the answer to that is a pretty definitive yes.
I think so. Quality of execution, not just quantity of content, is the new standard. And that is a fundamental challenge to how AAA games have been made for the last 20 years.